As our friend Glenn Kirschner, former 30-year federal prosecutor, served in the U.S. Army in JAG Corps. His YouTube channel, Substack Matters with Glenn Kirschner. Check it out. And he has a Substack, which I subscribe to. I recommend. Go Substack Glenn Kirschner. Glenn, it's great for you to be here. We've been friends for a long time. It's the fire sale. Buy whatever you can from America. It's going out. Statue of Liberty might be for sale pretty soon. That I would invest in. It is. I have to laugh a little, Glenn, because if not, this is just the worst time I can ever remember as an adult seeing the demise of the United States, the rule of law, our Constitution, everything we believe in.
Yeah, and all we can do is keep trying to find ways to fight like hell, or we won't have a country anymore, as I've heard it said. And that's what we're doing, Dean. You're doing it. I'm doing it. We're doing it from the outside. I used to fight inside government for the rule of law and allegiance to the Constitution. And I didn't think in my retirement that this is what I would be doing from the outside. But here we are.
And it's interesting you mentioned that speech because I was analogizing earlier today to, Donald Trump and Kathleen Leavitt, the press secretary today, they badmouth the judges. They go, they're a threat to the agenda, all this stuff. But then they have one line. Of course, we're not going to defy court orders. And then they demonize them. And it reminds me of January 6th, where Trump said peaceful one time and fighting 20 times to an angry crowd. And it seems like the same playbook. I don't know there's not a building there to attack, but I have no doubt they're already doing death threats against the judge. We saw with Judge Chutkin and other judges. It deeply concerns me that violence is one of the tools of the arsenal of MAGA, and they're not afraid to use it.
Yeah, and it even prompted the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court into wakefulness, at least momentarily, when he, issued a stern warning, obviously, to Donald Trump. Hey, don't you go saying that judges can be impeached because you disagree with their rulings. But, if you want to just talk about the imbecility of Donald Trump, it was only a few days ago, Dean, at the Department of Justice when he gave that obscene speech in the Great Hall, where I'd been many, many times as a DOJ prosecutor. And he said, anybody who criticizes a judge should be prosecuted, should go to jail. And here he is all day, every day, criticizing judges. I mean, his every word is a self-indictment, Dean. But it is dangerous that he has now sort of launched after my longtime friend and former colleague, Chief Judge Jeb Boasberg. I supervised him when he was a homicide prosecutor. I tried murder cases with him. He is the right man for this moment. He is presiding over cases that are the potentially democracy-busting cases. And, he's going to get to the right result, whatever that result may be at the end of these hearings that he's holding. But, Donald Trump endangers the lives of anybody that has the nerve to stand up to him, to hold him accountable for his misdeeds. And, we have, unfortunately, a Department of Justice that, is rolling over and playing dead. They're not going to enforce the rule of law. So we are in a very, very dangerous and precarious time in our nation.
And what do you make of that very thing with Judge Boasberg, that the DOJ filed a reply attacking him like these picayune things that you want, and you're focused on things that don't matter? I don't remember lawyers in the times I practiced telling the judges, you don't know what you're talking about in writing. This is something, and this is, I'm sure, Pam Bondi doing this for Donald Trump. But what's your reaction to DOJ attacking a judge like that in writing?
Yeah, I was a prosecutor for 30 years. You don't write in pleadings or say in court things like, Judge, we don't believe the information you're looking for is relevant. Guess whose determination that is? Sport, not yours, the judges. We're going to see the C word uttered very soon, contempt. It will start as criminal contempt. It will very likely morph. It will start as civil contempt. It will very likely morph into criminal contempt. And, for the viewers at home, here's a fun fact. The only time a judge can appoint an independent prosecutor to prosecute a case, it is contempt of court for violating court orders. So hold on tight, because the ride is going to get a whole lot bumpier.
And remember Merrick Garland? I keep expecting to see him like in the new season of White Lotus. Like, hey, there's Merrick Garland living in some resort now in Thailand or something, living his best life. I'm chatting with Glenn Kirschner. And we have to joke, Glenn, because nothing else. We need our buddy Monster Bronny here and others. Me and him have to go do the Axis of Evil tour again. But this time it's going to be about Trump and Orban and Putin, or especially Putin and Trump as the Axis of Evil. You touch on Justice Roberts' rare statement yesterday. For more than two centuries, it's been established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to a disagreement concerning a judicial decision. The normal appellate review process exists for that purpose. Trump doubled down. If a president doesn't have the right to throw murderers and criminals out of the country because a radical left lunatic judge wants to assume the role of president, then our country is in very big trouble and destined to fail. I wonder what do you think his end game is here? Because with all the executive orders, they knew the courts were going to stop some of them, right, and slow them or even stop them. I wonder if their goal is to have their base angry enough where they can literally say we're going to ignore court orders because we have to, because they're undermining the will of the people. And then I don't know where this goes.
I am believing more and more each day their end game is dictatorship,
Sure.
autocracy. I really am beginning
I
to
agree.
believe that. Now, I also, as an old RICO prosecutor, having seen a criminal enterprise or two, when you have Donald Trump signing blatantly unconstitutional executive orders, that's not my assessment. That is what a Reagan appointed federal judge said about Donald Trump's attempt to revoke the constitutional guarantee of birthright citizenship. When you have court after court saying that Donald Trump, and sometimes with a smatter of Elon Musk and his Doge bags, they are acting unlawfully in trying to shut down USAID. They were acting unlawfully, the administration, by firing probationary employees. They acted unlawfully by stiffing USAID contractors, and on and on. When Donald Trump's every sign of an executive order is a criminal act, I don't think it's unfair to say he is running the federal government as if it were a criminal enterprise. And now potentially violating court orders is just the next step in his criminal activity. And I watched him and read him laying into Chief Judge James Boasberg, who's presiding over the Venezuelan deportation case. And he's like, he's a lunatic, left-wing, radical, fringe judge. Can I tell our viewers something, Dean?
Sure.
In 2002, Jeb Boasberg was appointed to the D.C. Superior Court bench by George W. Bush. Thereafter, he was elevated after he became a federal court judge to be chief of the FISA court by Chief Justice John Roberts. Give me a flippin' break. And when Donald Trump says this judge just wants to put murderers out on the street, a sport. He was a homicide prosecutor who, by the way, never lost a murder case. And he didn't take the easy cases. I know because I assigned him those cases. He would never in a million years tell you he never lost a murder case. But I told that to the Washington Post when they interviewed me a couple of days ago about Judge Boasberg. So, Donald Trump is, he's just a stone cold liar. He is a bloviating wannabe dictator. And the problem is, Dean, there's no one there to stop him because the Department of Justice is in a coma and will remain in a Trump-induced coma. The Republicans in Congress, I don't understand how they won't even stand up for their own constituents. They're willing to just give their power away and ultimately give our democracy away when they could stand up and put a stop to this tomorrow. I don't know if it will ever be a bridge too far for the Republicans in Congress. But, we're just going to keep fighting. But I don't know where this ends. I think the end as of right now is unwritten.
It is unwritten. And I think Republicans are being held to account at town halls, which is why they don't want to do them anymore, by Republicans. And they're smearing Americans who are there in good faith because they're fearful that they've lost their job, or they're fearful of losing their job, or benefits they need as a lifeline. And they're being called outside agitators and paid people like that. Same thing that autocrats and dictators call protesters, the same exact line. But this is about our fellow Americans. It is deeply concerning. When you look at Trump invoking the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, it's not like he has the Lakeland Riley new law. He has a lot of powers. There's a reason he's going back to 1798, a law only used 3 times in time of war. Now, I don't understand. He could have used the normal laws we have. They literally just gave him more power with the Lakeland Riley Act. So what are your concerns about this? Because it's kind of jumped out at me. I don't know why you need the Alien Enemies Act of 1798.
I think it's going to be a daily power grab by Donald Trump. There will be no power that he doesn't try to grab onto and wield. Why? not just because he thinks, deporting a couple of plane loads full of Venezuelan migrants will have any kind of an impact on, anything beyond the fear and intimidation it will instill in everyone. Because if he can walk around saying, I deign you a threat to national security, I deign you a threat, get on the plane, we're sending you to foreign lands. If people believe he can do that, and thus far he's been able to get away with it, at least with the Venezuelan migrants. Though, interestingly, I mean, Judge Boasberg, when he first got his hands on that case contesting Donald Trump's lawful ability to do it, he instantly ordered a TRO because he recognized that it was very likely, I don't want to put words in his mouth, very likely not going to withstand legal and constitutional scrutiny. But Donald Trump went ahead and did it anyway. So, this is all about fear, intimidation, and he wants everyone to lay down because that is how he can, completely expand his power.
And I'm chatting with our friend Glenn Kirschner. And Glenn, you have Donald Trump and the Republicans is regurgitating what he says. These were gang members. They're the worst of the worst. And you read articles, NBC News and CNN and others are talking to family members who are like, our family member has no criminal background whatsoever. They're not in any gang. And for anyone out there who believes any words out of the Trump regime, you're ridiculous. Don't believe anything until you see objective proof. And we're both lawyers, so I demand that anyway. But with Trump's history, he's a convicted felon for lying and cheating in the 2016 campaign. He was charged with felonies for cheating in 2020. He's a liar and a cheat. And so I have no idea. Were some gang members? Probably. I don't know. Why don't you show us? And you rush them out of the country because you don't have the proof. You can just make a showing to a court easily. This is outrageous. We're living through.
Dean, I spent 30 years going after folk who broke the law, but I did it when there was admissible evidence that could sustain first an indictment and then proof beyond a reasonable doubt at trial. So it doesn't really matter if the folks who he ferreted away to El Salvador because he's making money on the fact that these folks are going to be housed in El Salvador. The folks that he, spirited away were gang members, weren't gang members. None of that really matters. What matters is we're a country of laws, and there are due process requirements before we grab hold of criminals and deport them or imprison them. And if you have no due process rights, then you have nothing. The rule of law is the single most important thing that keeps us up and running as a democracy. And Donald Trump is trying to kill the rule of law dead. And if he gets away with it, and, Dean, these circumstances are really dire because ordinarily we would say, well, we've got prosecutors, we've got law enforcement agencies like the FBI. The problem is we don't have those things at the moment. They're all in on the conspiracy, right? So I don't know, Dean. I don't know.
Look, there was a very concerning article today in the Washington Post I read about how the Trump administration and their circle of supporters in Congress now want to investigate all the apparatus of the Democratic Party, like Act Blue and other organizations that track dark money and that kind of stuff, to go after all of them. And that goal being there, like Viktor Orban in Hungary, where, yeah, on paper you're having elections, but it's a charade. You can never win a national election again. And that I can see this other path they're going down there. And then Donald Trump's got his more brute force path right in front of us. And, what do you say to people about not giving up? Because it is a hard time. It is a challenging time. This is the most challenging time I've lived through. And I love politics. This is not the kind of politics I love. This is different.
I hate politics. I love the rule of law. And that's why I devoted my life to it without fear or favor. So what I tell people is get engaged in any way you can. One thing that, all of the usual stuff about contacting elected representatives, which will only do so much good if you're in a red state, I understand, getting out and volunteer, door knocking, phone banking. But the other thing is we actually have these remarkable, largely nonprofit organizations who are in court fighting for our rights every day, whether it's the ACLU or Crew or Free Speech for People or Democracy Now! I hate American Oversight, all of these. And you know what they're doing, Dean? They're going into court And they are, in a very real sense, though not in a legal sense, representing us, the American people, our interests, and they're winning case after case after case. I would say plug in to one or more of those organizations in any way you can. It doesn't have to be giving money, but that's one way to support all of these groups that are in court fighting for our rights, the rights of all Americans. You can volunteer your time with them. You can go out and fundraise for them. You can do it because we're not hiring them. We don't pay them retainers, but they're in there just
Yeah.
knocking the crap out of the Trump administration in lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. So let's support them.
And that's a great point. That's why, to get to the next topic, which I covered on my show when it first happened, I said, this is one of the most concerning things I've ever seen. Trump sanctioning law firms for simply representing people he views as political enemies. And it began with with the lawyers who were giving Jack Smith free advice. And that was one set of sanctions, taking away the security clearance. Then it became much worse with the Perkins firm, banning them from contracts, opening an investigation into them by his DOJ and by Equal Opportunity EEOC. And, you had Judge Howell, and I saw you talking about it. I thought people have to get, because I know people don't like lawyers in general. This is not about lawyers. This is about the rule of law. This is about having lawyers not have a chilling effect. What is your reaction to Donald Trump sanctioning law firms that simply represent Democrats and people he doesn't like?
Yeah, well, it goes back to Shakespeare, right? That famous line, the first thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers, not because we don't like lawyers, although we really don't. I am a lawyer.
Right.
But it's because that is how you can sow chaos, and that's how anarchy can thrive, and that's how autocracy can take hold. If you get rid of all the lawyers, you get rid of the rule of law and those people who enforce and support the rule of law. Well, then you have a much easier go of wielding dictatorial power, and that's what Donald Trump's trying to do. And Dean, here's the thing: the Department of Justice is still filled with more than 100,000 really good people. I don't know where they're going to find the manpower and the woman power to bring all these corrupt investigations, because the other thing that we can and should do is every time one of these dirty DOJ lawyers goes into court and makes an argument that is unethical, they need to promptly be referred to their bar counsel, because those
Mm-hmm.
are state agencies beyond the reach of the federal government, unless Donald Trump sends stormtroopers into the 50 state bar associations. And the people who hold law licenses in fill in the state, Pennsylvania, New York, Missouri, wherever, if they are called to the carpet by their bar counsel, they're investigated, they're sanctioned, they're potentially disbarred for doing the dirty work of Donald Trump in court. That will have a chilling effect on them. So we have to fight as hard as Donald Trump is fighting. We're fighting for good. He's fighting for evil. I know that sounds trite and ridiculous and hyperbolic, but it is none of those things when you see judges appointed by Democrat presidents and Republican presidents saying Donald Trump is acting lawlessly and unconstitutionally in so many ways.
It's such a great point you made, and it's something we may have even talked about in the past, where some of the Trump lawyers did get disbarred or sanctioned by their state bar association or the authority that dealt with them in terms of your fitness as a lawyer and did you violate any ethical rules. That what I was thinking of. Some of the stuff with the judges, we're not going to tell you. You start disbarring some lawyers, and all of a sudden the DOJ, they're going to resign. They're not going to stay in DOJ because then you're not a lawyer anymore. You're just a person who wears a suit every day and talks some big words, and it doesn't even matter because you can't get a job anywhere. So, and what did you make of at the DOJ? Donald Trump went after lawyers by name. Andrew Weissman, Norm Eisen, he attacked by name. My friend Norm has come on many times. Mark Elias. Like, it's funny, they were all Jewish lawyers, and he went one after the other. I'm like, that's odd. There are many lawyers who are not Jewish, but you just picked the Jewish ones. But what is your take on him at the DOJ citing these lawyers as being essentially a threat in front of Department of Justice lawyers?
We often use the phrase bully pulpit when we talk about presidents having, the largest platform literally in the world to spread their message. Unfortunately, bully pulpit is literal with respect to Donald Trump.
Right.
He is a weak man, right? He is a weak man's idea of a strong man and a poor man's idea of a rich man. That's not original. We've all heard it before. And he's a stone cold bully. And, so he is going to call people names. He's going to be juvenile. He's going to be imbecilic. And he hopes that these people will, be too afraid to get out of bed in the morning. Guess what? They won't. None of us will. And we're going to keep fighting. And that's really all we can do, Dean. There's honor in the fight. I always think back to what I told my homicide prosecutors when I was chief of homicide at the DC U.S. Attorney's Office. I said, it's more important to try righteous cases than it is to win trials, because the honor is in the fight. You're striving for justice and accountability and making right something that was done to a victim or a community. And there's no shame in winning, and there's no shame in losing, but there's nothing but shame in declining to try a case for fear of losing. So, Dean, we just have to get up every day and keep fighting.
Absolutely. And that's the only thing. And together, remaining united, I think, is important. And people not checking out as hard, things get tough. What did you make of Trump floating the idea of revoking pardons? I wonder, at some level it was, and you're laughing, Glenn's actually laughing. So it's laughable in one way, but it's also an insight to his complete contempt for our entire system. There's the one part, Mike, you're out of your mind, but it says so much about you.
Yeah. So first of all, he said, "Oh my goodness, Joe Biden signed pardons with an auto pen." First of all, that may very well be a lie. Second, it doesn't matter, because if you go to the DOJ website, it says presidents can sign things, including legislation they can sign into law using an auto pen. That's a quote from the DOJ website. Now, I'm sure, Donald Trump has this iron grip on the gullible. So I assume you're going to start to hear some of his supporters say, "Oh, auto pen, auto pen, auto pen," right? So it seems pure folly to suggest that, as the Supreme Court has, the pardon power is, untouchable. It's expansive. Yep. Nobody can question it. But on a whim, every president can revoke the pardons of the prior president. None of that makes any sense. Listen, I am 100% confident that if this ever became a legal court challenge, they would say, no, each president cannot undo the pardons granted and accepted by people when, that president was the office holder.
Yeah, it can't be. When we look at the courts, and I have to be honest, right now, like, we're all doing our activism, and some Democrats are fighting and speaking out, which is good. In Congress, the courts are our last line. They stand between us and the abyss of autocracy. They really do. Yeah. And ultimately, it's going to be 9 people that are going to make the ultimate decisions. Because, I don't know if I talked about it with you, but there was a great breakdown by Pew about all the judges. 60+% are appointed by Democrats for the trial court level, district courts. And it's almost 50-50 on Court of Appeals. It's the Supreme Court where we've got our problems. I mean, do you think Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett become the 2 swing people to go with the 3 liberals? And it's kind of weird to have to count on them, but I don't know what else to count on or to hope for.
I have to wonder, with that statement that you read from Chief Justice Roberts, for more than 2 centuries, it's been established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision. I mean, I have to wonder if Chief Justice Roberts woke up one day and realized the Frankenstein monster of a president he had created and is now having buyer's remorse. So I do think that that Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett may say, you know what, we're really not that enamored of Donald Trump ending American democracy with these powers we foolishly bestowed upon him. And I think the 2 indications of that: one, this statement from Chief Justice Roberts, where, if I can just translate what I just read from Chief Justice speak to English, Roberts said to Donald Trump, "Shut up, sport." It's basically what that was. But the other really important data point is the first case to bubble up to the Supreme Court. It was whether the federal government would have to pay $2 billion to the USAID contractors who had already delivered, goods and provided services and were giving their invoices for payment to the federal government. And the Trump administration said, no, we ain't paying. And what did we have? Chief Justice Roberts, Amy Coney Barrett joining the other three justices and saying, guess what, Donald, you are paying. So they could have expanded the power of the executive right there. Instead, I wouldn't say they contracted it, but they certainly ruled against Donald Trump. That, I hope, Dean, I hope, is a sign of things to come.
And we need it to be. And very last thing, Glenn, on a personal level, how is it now you're not doing MSNBC, so you have more free time to work on your Substack and do your Justice Matters YouTube? How are you enjoying that? Is it more fulfilling?
Yeah, Dean, who told you I have free time? So here's the thing. It's funny because part of my mission, I didn't want to be aligned with corporate media, legacy media, mainstream media anymore. And I'm 100% independent, and I'm really enjoying that. I also am trying to talk and listen across the great divide, maybe talk about the importance of the rule of law to conservative audiences. Of course, the very first audience I had the pleasure of speaking with, it was a large Republican conference, Principles First Summit at the JW Marriott in Washington, D.C. Wonderful crowd, very receptive. And not only did we get a bomb threat into the conference, but the email that was sent together with the bomb threat claiming responsibility said, and the following 10 people deserve to die. I was one of the 10. That was my entree into talking and listening across the great divide to conservative audiences. Obviously, nothing against Principles First. It's a great organization. It is Republicans who say basically, to hell with Trump, we're putting principles first. And we have to support that. We have to try to build our, alliances where we can, maybe lead from the middle more than we have in the past. So listen, I've had 3 bomb threats now come in. I'm not going to keep in the last few weeks. But you know what? Do your worst. Do your worst. When I was a prosecutor, I had an actual hitman following me. My whole office was recused. I was the first witness in the hitman trial. You know what? I'm not so worried about these, MAGA keyboard warriors.
Glenn Kirschner, tough guy. All right, folks. He is a tough guy. Go to his Substack, Glenn Kirschner, Justice Matters with Glenn Kirschner on YouTube. Subscribe, Patreon. He's got a lot going on. He has no downtime. I was wrong. You've just had no time before. Now you just have no time still. Just filled it another way. So thanks, Glenn, so much for being on, my friends. Great chatting with you.